Today, I'm stoked to chat with my friend Mike DiMarco, who is my co-host here. We'll be talking about business, creativity, mixing the both of them. The way I kind of framed it to you guys was how to make them coexist, which can be a super tough thing as an artist. Mike's not only a friend of mine, but a great person I seek advice from. So it's really cool to have him in here. Um, I'll let him kind of introduce himself to you guys, but just as a precursor, he's an entrepreneur, business person, good friend, and Mike, if you could just like give people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me and allowing me to share what we're sharing with your group. And hello to everybody.
Yeah, of course.
So, um, basically, I'm an entrepreneur. I've started seven-figure companies, eight-figure companies. I'm also a chiropractor, so I'm really deep in the mind-body energy space. And right now, for the past year or so, I've been a coach. And I've known Ryan for a while, for a long time, over maybe 15 years now.
Dang.
And that's a long time. And for the past few years, he knows that I'm always like the type of person to try to encourage people and see different ways of doing things. So I decided to apply that and also doing all the work that I've done on myself to help other people realize their passion and see things maybe that they couldn't see, because we all deserve to have the best life that we could possibly have.
When I think about like my practice, I feel like it's creativity is really what fuels me. You know, like that's basically been like what occupies my brain, but also, you know, and photography, filmmaking is a creative thing, but it also, you if you want to do it full time, you
Mm-hmm.
have to also have the business brain. And I
Yeah.
feel like so much of like what I say to you, you're like, you come at me with the business angle. Where does that come from? And like, you, how do you even begin to approach creativity or business creatively?
Well, first of all, I mean, typically what people think photography, like art, like all these things is being creative, and a lot of other things are not. I believe that we all are creative, and all things that we do, we're constantly creating our reality through our actions, through our thoughts, through our beliefs. It's really just thinking about things in a different way, like shifting the perspective of how you're seeing business. Like if I think that this is true of, especially of a lot of creative people, that if they started seeing the way that they're not just creating their art and creating their doing their craft, but how they are funneling that to the public so they can create more expansion with their work and their business. So if they start seeing their business as something creative, that just little shift in perspective might actually help them work in their business a little bit more, because if they amplify their business, that's going to help them with whatever they're doing creatively. So it's like you can't have one or the other.
Yeah. So what I'm like digesting that into is like, you know, it's like you're suggesting that we look at business creatively, or maybe we look at business in a more fun way. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, well, so when you're creating something, like if you're an artist and let's say you're a painter, your tools are essentially going to be your canvas, your paintbrush, and your paint. And that's really it. Everything else comes from within here, right? Everything else you already have what you need to create the piece of art that you're going to create. And that's where artists come from. We dig deep into this invisible well of thoughts and ideas, and then we push them out and make them real, make them three-dimensional. It's the same thing for our business.
How do you
We
suggest we dive into that? How do we
because
channel and how do
I
we
think when it comes to business, most people think that it's more complicated than it is, and that they need something that they don't already have to make it happen. But we already have everything we need to make it happen, and it's really just as simple as using different practices like My favorite is meditation, um, journaling, getting things that are going to change your brain to be in a deeper, more flow state where those creative processes, those ideas can kind of like shine through. Um, I'm thinking about it that way. So like getting into a different state in order to have those ideas come through.
So help me like build the bridge there, because like you knowing me, like I'm like a natural skeptic to things, you know, like you may, how long have you been saying to me like, hey, have you tried meditation? And I'm like, no, like, whatever. Like I'll like put stuff aside, or like you'll suggest like maybe a new business venture or new idea for me in my business. And I'm like, well, hey, I don't know, like, like maybe I'm like reluctant or skeptical. How do you suggest that, we take this way of like maybe being open and applying it to business? So like how can this directly affect my business?
First of all, it's changing how you're thinking about money, right? Because most people have this idea in their head that exchange, like doing a transaction for money, is like such this bad thing, and you're taking away something from somebody by taking money from them, right? So that's like number one. We need to start shifting our perspective that we're not taking something away from them by taking money from them, especially if you're exchanging it for your art that's going to help them change their perspective on their life and open up the possibilities of what's possible for them. So it's realizing that what you're offering has even way more value than the money exchange of what's happening right now.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
that's
I think it's really important, especially for right now, like what's going on in the world. Most people, if they're not sick, they're worried about money because of what's going on. But all money is an agreement for an exchange of something of value.
yeah.
And if you can create value from that invisible well and just feel comfortable saying it's this much, and know that there's going to be somebody out there that will pay you that for it, like if it's reasonable, like just saying like it's $1 million for this pen or whatever. It's not, but you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like something
Yeah.
that feels in alignment.
Right. So, well, then when that, I think you're definitely pushing on like a pain point or a trigger. I'd say for most creatives is asking for what we're worth, and believing in our own value. And me and you have definitely had these conversations, because dude, it's so hard as a creative person, especially to make work that I'm emotionally like attached to, or feel a lot of pride, or proud of myself, or like happy with that, or like, there's so many different emotional values that are connected with an artist's work, and then you throw money into it. I start thinking about self-worth, value, things like that. I think you're really like you're at the pain point of like, that's like the crux of the artist right there, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, like what you're describing to me is also an attachment to the work that you have. Like we have to realize that anything that we create, it's temporary, right? It's not going to last forever. So anything that we create, we have to let it go eventually. And we have to be okay with whoever is getting it, exchanging money for it. So it's like getting okay with letting something go and not getting so emotionally attached to the art that we created. Maybe in the moment, that's what it was, but that piece of art is going to mean something different to somebody else. So that's number one, like removing the attachment to it. Because when we get emotional about transactions, that changes how we do transactions. When people get emotional about money, they make bad decisions when it comes to money, when it comes to finances, when it comes to doing any sort of business. That's why all the marketing out there is geared towards getting people to buy on emotion rather than them buying through like analytical thought, like actually thinking about what they're doing. So because people just make emotional decisions, and they could be good or they could be bad. It's not, but a lot of times they're not good.
Yeah.
So it's just that practice of learning how to like remove certain situations and the emotions from certain situations and things, giving less importance to the thing that's going to allow you to start creating the life that you want. And that's not just with like what you're selling in your business, that has to do with all things in your life, even your relationships. Like everybody has probably heard, they're looking for a relationship, they're looking for a partner, and when you stop looking, you find them. The right person shows up. When you're looking really hard, you're placing a lot of importance on it, a lot of emotion to it. It kind of keeps moving away from you.
Yeah.
And as soon
Well,
as
yeah,
you stop,
totally. When I'm like in that moment of like, so there's a couple things I thought about right there. Let me just, before I forget, the first one I would respond to that is like the statement of, but I need money. And the other thing that kind of sparked a thought of me here is about, you know, working towards your goal of making a living is sort of, sometimes we get so we just like put blinders on and we have like tunnel vision of just like this part of like, oh, I need to make money. And sometimes that's all we focus on. And it feels like the passage of time is just so slow and we're stuck in that moment. And it's almost like we've got molasses on our feet.
So I think that, that passage of time thing, their time can go really fast or it could go really slow, right? For us, when we're in flow, like if you're doing work on something that you're super passionate about, time just goes like that. Right. But if you're doing something that's pushing your awareness onto your five senses, like pushing your awareness to what's in front of you right now, or what you think is going to happen, or worry or doubt or fear or scarcity or frustration, it's going to take a long time because it's putting you in what's called a beta brainwave state, which is fight or flight. Like it's our brainwave state of where we're looking around us, we're using our five senses to make sure that we're safe. But as we go deeper, like say we go into flow states, like alpha brainwave state, like our brain literally changes frequency through meditation, through practice, through getting into repetitive motion, like a lot of athletes can get into. Everyone on here, when they're in photography, they're in flow, they're like in nature, they get into that state.
For sure.
Time goes fast because now you're in a creative state, you're opening up the floodgates of creativity in order to flow through you, and you're not consciously doing anything to block it. You're not worried about someone attacking you or whatever because you're not in beta anymore. Now you're going these deeper, more creative brainwave states. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, like, and it's, going back to the statement of like, but I need money. And you bring up fight or flight, and, because it's like your brain is either like thinking, shit, I need a paycheck, or I need my next job, or I need to make money, because that's what you're seeing. You're seeing an either or. You're seeing an either I'm making money or I'm not. And it's like, that is probably right there, fight or flight. It's like this or that, either or. And when you feel like you're in those moments, it's sort of, it kind of brings on this added stress that, I mean, it's easier to say when you're not in that state, but like, you don't really need to be that way. And I think learning how to navigate those types of things,
I think
through
one
meditation,
thing you can do,
or through like a physical activity, or through a certain practice, through photography, believe it or not, even if you're not like feeling it, you're thinking about money, like forcing yourself out there and bringing a camera is a form of meditation for a lot of people too. So it makes a lot of sense, this fight or flight idea.
Yeah. But also, and like when you're like, I need this, like investigating that question, like going really deep into the layers of, do I need money or is it something else? Do I need money or is it something else? And 100% of the time, you're going to find that it's really something else that you need or that you're feeling. And you think that money is going to take that feeling away or change the situation for you. And maybe it will or maybe it won't, but we all have the ability to create money, right? Especially if you consider yourself a creative person. It's just getting over your concept of value of what you're creating, like, and realizing that it's more valuable than the money. We have to stop putting money on a pedestal, because money is not more valuable than the thing that you're creating.
Yeah. So then would you suggest then creating more, making new work if you're an artist, a painter, a photographer, like is the answer to that then to make more, to pursue
Yeah,
that?
because the thing that you're creating is not going to be the last thing. So you just got to keep, like, once it's done, you go to the next one. And you just let the floodgates go through you and know that you're just going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah.
It
Totally.
like worrying about selling a piece of art or something and being emotionally attached to it. It's kind of thinking from a scarcity mindset where there may not be another thing that's so good that I did, but there will be.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I mean, dude, like as speaking from the photography lens, like for example, people are always going to get married. Maybe, they're not getting, married right now. Nobody's congregating, things like that. But like people are always going to get married. So I know at the end of the day, I could always have a job in wedding photography. If I have nothing else, I'll be like, okay, shit, now it's time for me to go make these wedding memories for people and go do these. So there's always somewhere I can pivot and be and do. So I know if I'm aiming towards commercial photography or filmmaking, that I know I can keep aiming towards those, because maybe I'm not going to achieve all the things that I want right now, but I can keep aiming, and if I fall, I can fall back on these other skills that I have too, and that's like a part of my business as well.
So you don't need money. You just need a wedding or an idea or
Yeah, I
something
mean that's
to
it.
offer somebody else. Something.
It's so tough to say you don't need money though. It's how it's like that's like such a concept that I'm still digesting, and that's one that me and you have talked about quite a bit, just like with financials and business and I think you're right though. The concept of money is the thing that creatives really need to learn. I feel like maybe human beings in general will just keep learning about it, as long as you think, because like I would love to have a class and be like, hey everybody, okay, we've got 10 steps for you and this is how you're going to make all your money. 1 2 3 4, like it just doesn't happen that way. Like we wish we had this formula where we could crunch all the numbers and say, hey, this is business, bada bing bada boom, pay me.
Mhm. Well, I mean, there are structures that people can follow, but you're going to have to find the one that works best for you, because if you look out, there are many different ways to do everything. There's like infinite possibilities. So you have to really clear your head. Like, this is an opportunity where people are staying inside to start clearing themselves from the noise of how they think that they should be doing something based on the way that other people are doing it. Because if you look at the most successful people in the world, they all do things in their own unique way. They maybe started out with a certain model, but they ended up finding their own path. And that's why they became so successful, and that's why they're so well known. And we all have that opportunity to do that. We just have to believe in ourselves enough and in order to do that. And when we feel uncomfortable taking steps into the unknown, we have to actually start getting comfortable taking steps into the unknown, because our brain is programmed in us. So the way that we operate is 95% of what we do is our subconscious mind, and we're just operating on a set of programs. And those programs were set from the ages of 0 to 7, and then a little bit off when we're in our teenage years. And once you're the age of 35, you're pretty much, most people are on autopilot. They're just running on a set of programs. And 5% is their conscious mind, right? So they've done experiments in the lab where they can literally influence your decision making with magnets. They can make you say yes or no to something. So your subconscious mind will make a decision half a second before you're consciously aware of it. So if they use those magnets to stimulate you to say no to something that you normally would say yes to something, that would happen half a second before you consciously made that decision. And you would also think that you decided to say no when normally in the past you would say yes. So you would think it was your own decision.
Well, so steering up away from those, things that are maybe ingrained within us or already set within us. Sounds like you're suggesting that like you be conscious of trying to figure out a new way or a new path.
Yeah, so those programs, you're like literally a consciousness riding on these set of programs. Like row your boat, that that nursery rhyme, gently down the, you're just riding down the stream. But what you can do is you can gain awareness of these programs by expanding your awareness, by taking a step, using a different perspective, by maybe working with somebody, a coach, or doing your own work. It's a lot harder to do on your own. It's easier when you have somebody outside perspective. You can start rewriting those programs. And when you feel resistance, that doesn't mean that you maybe shouldn't be doing that thing. That could mean that you're rewriting a program and you have to override it, right? And you may not realize it, that it's actually a program, or if it's something that you really shouldn't be doing unless you start gaining this awareness by doing this work on yourself.
It sounds like, believing in yourself is kind of what you're alluding to, that makes you successful in business, or at least keeps you open to new ideas in business.
I think it's like, you can say believing in yourself and confidence, but it's also, once you know, it's having a knowingness, right? You don't have to believe anything. You just have to know how the universe works and how the brain works.
Well, I don't know if anybody really knows that.
I mean, there's theories on this.
Right,
no one really knows, but when you see evidence, then that can create a belief that's a higher level belief that's not going to limit you on a lower level.
So then how do like, if I want to draw on like business, if I if I want to make something happen or have something be different, like, remember, like, as like an artist, like a lot of times money is, and you're a full-time artist, like, or even if you work full-time somewhere else and you pursue creativity on your own, it's still, it costs money to do things. It costs money to travel places. What's like do you have like a creative path or creative ideas where people can kind of maybe apply it to themselves on how they can maybe find money a different way?
Well, I mean, for you, all right, I'm sure you've had experiences where you're like, yeah, it costs money to travel. But then this job comes up where, say, you wanted to travel to Tofino and someone else foots the bill for you. So you didn't have to pay for it. But yeah, it costs money, but you didn't have to pay for it out of your own pocket.
Right.
And that opportunity came to you through these different means that maybe you were conscious of it and you didn't expect it, but you were directing yourself into that that timeline, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and the way that I did that, going back to what we were saying earlier, is just create work, put it out there, create work out there and put it out there. I feel like that when you're in that flow as a creative, like that is where the business opportunities come like show themselves. But also maybe it goes down to like, being in that creative flow and pushing those things out allows me to be happy and satisfied and fulfilled in those moments. And maybe when the business things pop up, I'm not concentrating on them happening. They just sort of happen and it makes sense, like, and I think the trick for me is being in that creative flow more often than not, which is still, I'm trying to cultivate that, because it seems like business follows that.
I mean, look, I think every single person on here probably knows how to make money. They're just worried about what other people are going to think about them. They think that other people are going to think about them when they start selling their art. Like, I know for a fact that you know how to make money, because as long as I've known you since high school, like, you've been an entrepreneur. You were the kid that took candy bars and resold them in school for money. Like, I didn't do that. You did that. So just because you're creative doesn't mean you can't be entrepreneurial and know how to make money. It doesn't mean that the thing that you're selling can't be the thing that you're creating. So when you are the generator of the thing that you're selling, that also creates sovereignty, which, with what's going on right now in the world, that is the hugest advantage that you can have, where you're the generator of the thing that you're selling, and you also know how to sell it. You also have the ability to turn it into a business and see the opportunities, right? And not limit yourself to what's going on right now, but create the possibility in your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%, man. Yeah, for sure. Really well said. That's like, yeah, being the person, you know, you can be an entrepreneur and be creative at the same time. And you know, it's nuts. Like, you know, there's a lot of people who don't think that's possible. And, you know, sometimes maybe I have my own moments where I'm like, oh, I just want to create this stuff. I wish I didn't have to like even earn money. Like, you know, you have all these wild thoughts, you know. Um, but yeah, being the person who can also sell what they make is is amazing. And at the end of the day, that's like a beautiful thing. And I think that's why we're all here. So I just want to make a note though for everybody here. You feel free to type into the chat, ask some questions if you have any for me or Mike. We'll continue the conversation, but please feel free to weigh in or ask anything. Mike's a valuable resource. So
And I think it's also important to know that, like, there's a lot of talk about finances and saving money and investing money. But when you become your own bank account, like, you don't ever have to worry about money again. You're literally your own bank account. You could have $0 in your bank and then create more money from nothing.
yeah, I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, shit, you're just as a photographer, you're picking up that camera and pressing the button and you're making something and like, you know, and you know, there's a process to it. But you like you create something and you make something and that's what we're selling. You know, we're selling pictures either as art or branding or, you know, people's personal memory. Like we're creating these things, or at the very least, we're recording these things and for other people to have or to use or to share or to appreciate. And yeah, like you if I had a camera in my hand and $0 in my bank account, I could go out and I could find a way to take the camera and make the money with it. So I agree with what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, it's your perspective that's valuable. That's what you're doing with like with the camera. You're capturing your own perspective, and that's valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, fully.
Like, how many people on here think that if you're selling something, you have to like sell something physical, and it has to be like this? They like overthink what they're selling, like most people.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
for
they don't.
sure. Well, you know, the photographers always think like, you know, like, oh, I should sell prints or like, you know, and I've thought these things and I will sell some prints sometimes. And I even had like a section on my website. I was like, oh, prints. I need to like, people like want to like buy this thing and put it in like, you know, print sales for me, to be honest, is not really a big thing. Occasionally I sell a big piece and that's cool. But like, that's like, I don't have to sell an actual physical thing. You know, like, yeah, it'd be great if we all like invented something and it was this thing and it got, you could manufacture it and like, cool, you could just kick back and put your feet up and count your checks, you know, but like really we're creating something and it doesn't have to be a physical thing, you know, especially, you know, photography is digital, you know, like, it's just
It,
part of our lives.
is everyone on here a full-time photographer, or do you guys do something else as well? Like, right? I want to see in the chat if you're paying attention.
I know a couple of these guys are. I know Madeline is here, is a friend of, and then my old roommate Amber's here. She's not a photographer.
Corporate world, but looking to transition.
Hmm.
Yeah. Financial consulting.
Oh, cool.
Amber, what do you do in the corporate world? What's your actual job? Job. Engineer. Okay.
LJ, yeah, I feel you, man. Yeah, full time up till 2 3 weeks ago. Yeah, I hear you, man. My whole year has been pulled out from underneath me.
Merger and acquisitions. Okay. So I think just even based off the people in here, they understand the concept of just like trading knowledge and perspective for money, right? Like, based on those type of jobs. No one's really selling something physical. So that concept, and usually those are the jobs that people or make the most money from, the highest paid. Like the CEO of the company, they're not really doing anything except offering their perspective on things.
Yeah, that's true.
And that can apply to any level, any person, any industry. anything we do.
Yeah. Parker, yeah, content creation, mental health counselor, yeah.
What
Yeah, I mean,
question?
it's interesting you frame like, you know, CEOs. I mean, now that I'm like digesting that, I'm like, yeah, man, like CEOs, they're just like, they're steering the ship. Like they're not making the products. They're not making the thing.
No, usually the
They're
people that
not
do that
designing it.
are the lowest paid, the people doing like all the actual hard work.
Right. Yeah.
What questions do you guys have? Maybe about getting in the creative headspace, like how do you do it? Right in the chat.
I think one of the things as a photographer that gets frustrating is the varying levels of how people value photography, which complicates things when it comes to negotiating. Would you suggest asking about budget before giving your rate? I'll take that one real quick and then we'll hand it to Mike. But yeah, I'd like to get his perspective. But yeah, I mean, when you're negotiating with somebody, I mean, for me, like we'll see, we'll see what Mike says on this. But like for me, money is the last thing I like to talk about. I love to talk with a client or potential client, and and I want to get to know if I really want the job, to be honest. Like, is this thing going to fulfill me? I want to ask all relevant questions like, oh, where's it going to be? What's it for? Like, you know, like and me and you, we can talk more specifically. I'm happy to chat with you afterwards or one-on-one about the types of things you should ask as a photographer. But really what it boils down to for me is making sure I actually want to shoot the job. Because if I don't want to shoot the job, I'm going to do a terrible job doing it. So before I know what the budget is, before I know about money, I want to ask a bunch of questions first because I want to know, is this going to be the correct partnership between me and the potential client? And then when I figure out all those things, then I can figure out money. And I know that sounds sort of like counterintuitive. I used to approach meetings or phone calls or potential clients with like, okay, all right, this is the price I need to get for this job if I'm going to get it. Now I'm like, I need to figure out if I want this job, and then let's talk about the money afterwards. Sometimes the money's there, sometimes it's not. You know, there's some wiggle room, you know, to varying degrees. But I mean, we can chat more specifically about that too. But Mike, I'd like to get your take on that for sure.
Yeah, I think first of all, when it comes to offering your services, like you shouldn't be negotiating. Like that shouldn't even enter your mind. Like, would you go to a lawyer that charges $400 an hour and be like, well, can we do it for $300 an hour? Because that's what I feel your services are worth. You're going to say, no, get the F out of here. Go hire somebody else. Like, that's just what my retainer is $10,000 and that's or 30 grand. And that's what it is. Like, you have to pay it or you can't hire me because you need me. So first of all, I would remove that out of your mind. Like, do not even think about negotiating. And we've talked about this. Because just because you're a photographer doesn't mean that what you're doing is any less valuable than what a lawyer is doing. Like it's even more valuable. They're going to use your photography to sell the thing that they're doing. And one shot can make the biggest difference in their bottom line. So that's number one. Like, do not negotiate. Like, what you do need to do is gauge where they're coming from. Are they seeing you as a photographer as a commodity, or are they really respecting the level of depth of like what you're actually doing for them? Because if it's actually seeing you as an artist, valuing the photography, the creative, the money isn't going to be such a big deal because then you're just providing an ROI, right? You're just providing a return on investment. So I think it's getting more everything outside of us, the way that people respond to us is a reflection of something inside, how we're viewing ourselves, and whether most people want to admit that or not, it's the truth. It's the absolute 100% truth. So if people are showing up that way for you, then it's something that you have to work on for yourself and how you're showing up. Because there are, you know, there's professional photographers, like what super well-known guys, or even not well-known, or you know people that the way that they show up, if they're grounded in their energy, if they're almost they're it doesn't matter how they show up. If they say a rate, they're going to get it, or the person like really can't afford it and they're just not going to be able to hire you.
Yeah, well, for sure.
That
Like,
makes sense.
it comes down to, the way you feel about yourself, because if I don't feel that good about myself, maybe I'll take a job that is not offering what I'm worth, and then
Right.
I feel worse, but if I feel good, I, one, can ask those questions, and two, decide if this is the right job for me, and three, then accept the job, like, or talk about money, or something like that. Like, but when you feel good, which I'll admit, we're all human beings, is easier said than done sometimes. It's just, but when you set yourself up to remember these things, remind yourself these things, you're not only going to get the work that you want, but I think you'll also be hired at the rate that you feel is fair.
Yeah, and it all comes down to also, I mean, if you're feeling like this job so much rests on this one job, that's like way too much importance. And what you need to do is you need to go out there and you need to talk to way more people and offer your service to a lot more people and set up more meetings. So that way this one job becomes way less important to you and you can charge what you charge. I mean, be realistic, like if what you're charging is actually what you're worth, then you're going to get it. That's also important to recognize where you are in your development of like what you're doing. Like how good actually are you, and be realistic with yourself about how good you are.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. Anybody else got some questions? Feel free to light the chat up.
I hope that was helpful. I'm not trying to be like, just trying to tell you what you need to hear.
Yeah, no, dude, this feels like a conversation between me and you, and this is the stuff that's always helped me. I feel like it's coming through. Yeah, Amber, it's very, very helpful. Thanks, guys. Cool. I'm not gonna agree, especially in regards to putting yourself out there. Yeah, I agree with that also.
It goes back to the decrease in the importance. When you place too much importance, you start rejecting things. Like that's how relationships work. When you put too much importance on something, and now you never seem to get it. It's like a magnet. You're like pushing the magnet in the wrong direction and you're just like repelling the thing constantly instead of just resting and being relaxed and being in a good, nice, peaceful, neutral energy.
Yeah, I agree with that. Totally second that. Well, cool. Sweet. All right. Well, so if there's no other questions, we'll probably start wrapping this up. Mike, if you got anything else that you want to touch on or talk about, you're more than welcome to.
I don't know, man. I would love for people to ask questions because like I was thinking about this before. When I was in school, I was always the person that whenever the teacher would ask a question, I would raise my hand and if I had an answer or not, and not be afraid to give the answer or not be afraid to ask a question that maybe wasn't that great. Like, and that's also really important to putting yourself out there. You have to not be afraid to ask questions. Whether you think that people are going to think that they're like not a good question or not, they're going to think you're dumb. It's like, stop caring what other people think and take advantages of the opportunities in front of you. Like there is an exercise that some personal development programs have you do, what you can't do now because everything's shut down, is going to a coffee shop and asking for a free coffee or a discount on your coffee. And whether you get it or not is irrelevant. It's just putting yourself out there and not being afraid to ask a question that's for your advantage.
Wow, I like that, man. I mean, you know me, I love coffee, but that would be like a challenge for sure. Going into a coffee shop and asking for a discount on it. Like it's funny that I also like how you mentioned earlier, you wouldn't ask a lawyer, hey, like, can you make it 300 bucks an hour? Like
Yeah.
people ask us that all the time. As creatives, they're always like, oh, can you do it for this? Can you do it for less? Can you then they ask you, okay, how much you charge? Like, oh, can you do it for this? Like that is like it. And you know what that does? I think it's really important to stay like try and stay strong and do these, but like you know what that kind of does? It sort of wears at you a little bit. And it really touches on this thing and you're like, you know what? If you're not careful, you start letting that thing devalue you too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we think like maybe there's something bigger than ourselves out there, right? These other people, maybe their opinion is more important than ours. Because what we do, especially even with creatives, we're like, I want to do something meaningful that's like bigger than me, right? But there is, I heard this on Jim Carrey actually, there is nothing bigger than yourself. And you have to really start embodying that. Because once you aren't here anymore, once you leave this body and you no longer are you right now, and whatever you are after this is irrelevant, you're no longer here. So like your perspective, this maybe world doesn't exist anymore. So you being here right now is the most important thing. So you creating consciously the world that's the best for you, that makes you actually happy, is the most important thing.
I love that, man. I love that. Like, immediately because I think about like, you know, you aspire to like, oh, if I can get this job or I can get this client or man, I'd love to shoot for this magazine or this brand or like I want to shoot this commercial. And I've had those thoughts and I've even had I've talked about this in my mentorship class. Like I wrote a list of 5 clients I wanted to work for. And then I started like this was years ago and I started ticking those off, the checklist and I was like when I wrote those down, I was embarrassed for myself. I was like, I'm not, I'm not gonna get those. Like, but putting it out there and then achieving those things, and then, but you know what? That didn't it. I'm still the same person. I still feel the same way. Like I'm proud of my achievements. I'm happy. I like love making my clients happy, et cetera, et cetera. But like you can put like a job or a thing or an achievement on a pedestal, and you get there, and you realize it's not bigger than you. It didn't make you any bigger. It didn't like fill you up anymore. It didn't make you become something. Sure, it was challenging and you had to put in the hard work to get there. I'm not discounting that. But at the end of the day, I'm just still the same person.
But that's also another point. It doesn't have to be challenging. It doesn't have to be hard to get there. And we make it hard.
Well, you got to put in
Everything
hard
can,
work. You got to work hard.
I've personally, when people were like, you should be proud, you worked really hard to do this, I've never felt like I worked hard. I don't work hard. I just don't. Things come easy.
Come on, man.
And
You
that's,
do work hard. You put in, I mean, you're not giving yourself enough credit, dude. You're an avid reader. You stay up on what's happening in the world, in your own industry, in other people's industry.
yeah, but it
You're
doesn't
always
have to be
thinking.
hard. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be hard.
I get that. No,
Those
I
things can be
understand. Yeah,
fun and
well,
feel good.
that famous quote, like if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life or whatever the heck that is.
Right. But when you get to a certain point, if you felt like you didn't work hard to get there, and I've had this experience, like it was easy, like it was, oh man, that was like too easy. Like maybe it should have been harder. We self-sabotage, like, oh my God, like that should have been hard. Everyone's telling me that success is hard and I should have been hard to get here, but it was like so much easier than it really was. Like maybe I didn't really get it. Maybe I'm not really
Yeah.
there. So then we make things extra hard for ourselves. Like everything we're talking about, business, creativity, all these things, they're actually really simple. They don't have to be hard. We make them hard. We make them complicated. Like with perfect example is health, right? People make health so complicated out there, especially now in the world. They're like, it's so complicated. Oh, like you're gonna get sick and all these things. But health is actually really simple. Simple. but we make it complicated. We think it's complicated, but it's really simple.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's like, that's like the problem with, human beings. We see these perceived things in front of us, and sometimes it's a legitimate roadblock, and other times they're, it's not. I think we're creatures that like processes. So we think to ourselves like, oh, this is the process. So if I get a camera and I photograph this person and I get this thing, and then I'll get this job, and then I'll be a photographer. Like we think we see the trail that we have to follow. We think we see the formula that we got to put together to get the answer.
Well, that's programmed into us. I don't think that's a natural thing for human beings because of the way that we're brought up and our schooling. It's like you get to grade 1, then you go to grade 2, and then you go to grade 3. And every test you take, you get to study and have all the answers before you take the test. So when you take the test, you know everything because you did it all before. Whereas in real life, business, in creativity, you don't know where you're going. You just go. You kind of have an idea of where you want to go. You set this visual, you visualize it. And then however you get there, it just kind of magically comes together. You just do. You just are being.
It's so true, man. It's so true. I love that. That's the creative process 100%. Yeah, you just go.
But that's what holds people back, especially if you are an engineer or maybe you have a master's or you have a doctorate or something like higher education. You're in that mindset of like, I need to get another certification. I need to do another school. And like having mentors is super valuable and having processes is super valuable. But you don't have to do more school. You don't have to have a certification. It's not always an A, B, C. Things are not linear. The universe does not work in a linear fashion at all.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I feel you. You can jump steps, like for me, I didn't study photography. I just did it, and then I just arrived there. And now I have to figure out though, what's next? What do I want to do next that I don't have to, necessarily have this training on, but what am I going to go towards next? And, and business for me was one of those things I feel like I'm always learning and trying to figure out and be open to. So
you're definitely already doing what's next.
Trying, man. Cool. Well, thanks, Mike. If anybody's got questions, again, you're welcome to type in the chat here, or you can follow up with me or Mike. I'll make sure that everybody's got his info. This stuff's going to go to YouTube too, so we'll make sure we drop all the links in there for everybody. Mike, thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me. And thank you guys for actually asking questions, because sometimes people don't.
Yeah, cool. All right, dude. I'll see you soon, and thanks so much. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.